In the heart of Charleston, South Carolina, the upscale eatery Riverstone Bistro was bustling with energy. The warm afternoon sunlight streamed through its grand windows, casting a golden hue over the chic interiors. Patrons dressed in tailored outfits celebrated milestones or sealed business deals as the soft notes of a live pianist filled the air. The elegant atmosphere was briefly interrupted when an elderly black woman entered. Dressed in a navy coat with intricate embroidery and carrying a modest black handbag, her presence was quiet, yet commanding. Her name was Mrs. Evelyn Carter. The hostess, though polite, offered a slightly strained smile as she asked, "Do you have a reservation, ma'am?" Evelyn's calm response, under Carter, was met with subtle hesitation before being led to a table tucked near the kitchen. The placement was far from ideal, but Evelyn maintained her grace, silently observing the room with a quiet strength. The seconds stretched into long, quiet minutes as Mrs. Evelyn Carter sat in her tucked-away corner at Riverstone Bistro. The polished hustle of the restaurant continued around her, with Jason, the waiter, breezing past her table again and again without even a glance. Evelyn's water glass sat empty, untouched since she arrived, while nearby diners had their drinks refreshed promptly and effortlessly. A young couple seated a few tables away exchanged uncertain glances, their whispered conversation barely audible over the pianist's delicate melody. "Why hasn't that table been served yet?" the woman murmured to her partner, gesturing subtly toward Evelyn. Her partner shrugged uncomfortably, sneaking a quick look toward Jason, who was joking with a group at another table. Evelyn noticed the looks, the quiet whispers, the not-so-subtle avoidance by the staff. But this wasn't new to her. She had faced this kind of subtle exclusion before, the kind that didn't come with loud words or overt actions, but made itself known in the delays, the dismissive glances, and the unspoken judgment. Despite it all, Evelyn maintained her grace. Her hands rested lightly on the table, her expression calm and composed. It wasn't in her nature to cause a scene. She had learned long ago that dignity and patience could speak louder than confrontation. Jason finally paused at her table, holding a tray of drinks destined for another group. His tone was clipped, his words barely masking impatience. "Still deciding?" he asked, as though the long wait had been her fault. Evelyn looked up at him, her steady gaze soft yet firm. "I'm ready to order whenever you're able," she replied, her tone polite but carrying a quiet authority that seemed to momentarily unnerve him. He muttered something under his breath and walked away, leaving Evelyn to wait once more. Across the room, Elijah Carter's sharp eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. He had watched every interaction, or lack thereof, since his mother had entered. He noted the way Jason lingered at other tables, laughing and chatting with patrons, while his demeanor toward Evelyn was brisk and dismissive. Elijah's jaw tightened as he saw Jason exchange a faint smirk with another server, as if sharing some unspoken joke. The frustration simmered within him, but he held back, determined to let the situation play out further. The air in the restaurant began to shift. Other diners were now noticing the disparity, their conversation softening as they cast curious glances at Evelyn. The discomfort among the patrons grew palpable, yet Jason seemed oblivious, or perhaps emboldened, by his own carelessness. For Evelyn, it was just another moment of quiet endurance, but for Elijah it was a breaking point waiting to happen. As he tapped his fingers rhythmically on the table, his resolve hardened. This wasn't just about service, it was about respect, and soon he would ensure the lesson was learned. Elijah Carter sat silently in the corner of Riverstone Bistro, his sharp gaze locked on Jason as the waiter once again brushed past Mrs. Evelyn Carter's table without a word. For nearly 30 minutes, Elijah had watched his mother endure the subtle but unmistakable mistreatment. She remained poised and dignified, but he knew the quiet pain these moments carried. The sight of her empty water glass and untouched menu stoked a slow-burning anger within him. Every laugh and cheerful interaction Jason shared with other patrons felt like a deliberate contrast to his curt behavior toward Evelyn. Elijah's mother wasn't just any diner. She was the very reason Riverstone Bistro existed, a testament to the values of integrity, hard work, and respect she had instilled in him. To see her treated like she didn't belong in the space he had built felt personal. Yet, Elijah didn't act immediately. Years in the restaurant industry had taught him that patience, often carried more weight than impulsive confrontation. He signaled quietly to Dana, the manager, who had been hovering near the bar, sensing the growing tension. "Keep an eye on table 12, Elijah instructed under his breath, nodding toward Evelyn. "Don't intervene yet. I want to see how this plays out." Dana hesitated but nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. Elijah's eyes returned to Jason, who was now chatting with a group of patrons at a nearby table, his demeanor light and easy. When he passed Evelyn again, she raised her hand gently. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft yet steady, cutting through the room's murmurs. Jason paused, his expression tightening. "Yes?" he replied curtly, as though she were interrupting something important. "I'd like to place my order now, if you're not too busy," Evelyn said, her tone betraying none of the frustration she surely felt. Jason sighed audibly, glancing around as though seeking an escape. "I'll be back in a minute," he muttered, turning away before she could respond. That was the breaking point. Elijah rose from his chair, his movements deliberate. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath as he crossed the room, his presence commanding attention without a word. He reached Jason just as the waiter was cracking a joke with another table. The easy confidence on Jason's face evaporated when he noticed Elijah standing beside him. "Elijah," Jason stammered, attempting a nervous smile. "I didn't know you were here." "I've been here," Elijah replied calmly, though his voice carried an edge that silenced the room. "And I've been watching." Jason's smile faltered. "Watching what?" Elijah's eyes flicked toward Evelyn's table before locking on to Jason. "Watching you ignore my mother for 30 minutes while serving everyone else like royalty. Watching you treat her like an inconvenience in the space she inspired me to create." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. The room fell silent, every patron now watching the confrontation unfold. Elijah's voice remained steady, but his message was unmistakable. Respect wasn't optional, and this lesson wouldn't be forgotten. The room was silent as Elijah Carter's words settled over the restaurant, the weight of his calm authority unmistakable. Jason's face drained of color as he glanced toward Mrs. Evelyn Carter, sitting composed at her table, her quiet dignity a stark contrast to the shame that now radiated from him. "Your mother?" Jason stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of the revelation. "Yes," Elijah said, his tone sharper now. "The woman you've ignored, dismissed, and treated as if she didn't deserve the same respect you've given every other table in this room. That's my mother." Jason opened his mouth to respond, but Elijah raised a hand, cutting him off. "Don't," he said coldly. "There's no excuse for what you've done, and everyone here has seen it." Dana, the manager, stepped forward cautiously, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. "Dana," Elijah said, his voice steady but firm, "take over table 12. Make sure my mother has everything she needs immediately." Without hesitation, Dana nodded and hurried to Evelyn's table, filling her water glass and apologizing profusely. Evelyn offered her a polite smile, her calm demeanor unshaken despite the public confrontation unfolding in her honor. Elijah turned back to Jason, his gaze hard. "As for you," he continued, "you're done for the day. Go home." Jason froze, his apron hanging loosely in his hands as the enormity of Elijah's words sank in. For a moment it seemed like he might protest, but the room's collective gaze weighed heavily on him. Silently, he untied his apron and left, the heavy door swinging shut behind him. The sound seemed to echo through the restaurant, marking the end of an uncomfortable chapter. Elijah exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly as he walked to his mother's table. He crouched beside her, his expression softening as he met her steady gaze. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked quietly, his voice filled with concern. "I'm fine, Elijah," Evelyn replied, reaching out to pat his hand. "You handled that well." Elijah sighed, regret flashing across his face. "I should have stepped in sooner." Evelyn shook her head gently. Number U let him reveal his character. Sometimes that's more powerful than confronting someone immediately. As the restaurant returned to its usual rhythm, the atmosphere had undeniably shifted. Conversations were quieter, the staff more attentive, and the patrons more reflective. Evelyn's quiet dignity and Elijah's decisive action had left a mark on everyone present. A reminder that respect and fairness weren't just ideals, they were imperatives. When Evelyn's meal arrived, she accepted it with grace, her composed presence a testament to the strength she carried. Across the room, Elijah returned to his seat, his gaze still lingering on his mother. The lesson was clear. Leadership isn't just about managing, it's about upholding values that ensure dignity for everyone. And for Elijah, that was non-negotiable. As the evening progressed, the energy in Riverstone Bistro shifted. The once bustling dining room now hummed with quieter, more reflective conversations. The confrontation between Elijah Carter and his staff had left an undeniable mark on everyone present. The patrons who had witnessed the moment now glanced occasionally toward Mrs. Evelyn Carter, their expressions a mixture of respect and quiet admiration. Meanwhile, the staff moved with newfound purpose, their actions more deliberate and attentive as they worked to restore the dignity that had briefly been overshadowed. Evelyn remained composed, her presence steady as always. She gracefully accepted the dishes brought to her by Dana, the manager, who apologized repeatedly for the treatment she had endured. "I'm deeply sorry, ma'am," Dana said, her voice earnest. "This should never have happened, and it won't happen again." Evelyn offered a small nod, her calm gaze meeting Dana's. "Thank you," she replied softly, her words carrying a weight that was felt far beyond the surface. At another table, a young couple leaned toward each other, speaking in hushed tones. "I can't believe he treated her like that," the woman whispered, shaking her head. "It really makes you think about how often this happens, and no one says anything." Her partner nodded thoughtfully, his gaze fixed on Elijah as he returned to his own table. "Yeah," he said. "It's not just about what you see, it's about what you do when it happens." Elijah overheard their exchange as he walked past, their words settling heavily in his mind. For years, he had worked to build Riverstone Bistro into more than just a fine dining establishment. To him, it was a space meant to reflect the values his mother had instilled in him: respect, fairness, and integrity. Yet tonight had been a sobering reminder that even in places meant to embody those ideals, vigilance was necessary to ensure they were upheld. As the dining room began to empty, Elijah joined his mother once more, escorting her to the door. The cool evening air greeted them as they stepped outside, the glow from the restaurant's windows casting a warm light on the street. "You've built something special here, Elijah," Evelyn said, her voice steady yet kind. "But remember, it's not just about the food or the ambiance, it's about how people feel when they walk through those doors." Elijah nodded, her words resonating deeply. "I know, Mom," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "I let you down tonight." "No," she replied firmly, placing a hand on his arm. "You gave everyone in there something to think about. That's what matters." As she stepped into the waiting car, Elijah watched her go, her strength and wisdom leaving an indelible mark on the night. Inside, Dana gathered the staff for a brief meeting. "What happened tonight is a wake-up call," she said, her tone serious. "Respect and dignity aren't optional. They're non-negotiable." For Elijah, the night wasn't just about addressing a single incident. It was a reminder of the responsibility that came with leadership, to ensure that every person, whether patron or staff, felt valued. Riverstone Bistro wasn't just a restaurant, it was a reflection of the values that mattered most. And from that night on, those values would shine brighter than ever. As the final guests filtered out of Riverstone Bistro, the weight of the evening still lingered in the air. The staff, normally chatty and relaxed during closing, moved quietly, their expressions thoughtful. Dana, the manager, gathered everyone in the dining room, her posture straight and her tone steady. "Tonight wasn't just another busy night," she began, her voice firm but not unkind. "It was a reminder of the standard we hold ourselves to, and the consequences when we fall short." The team stood in a loose circle, their gazes shifting from Dana to Elijah Carter, who leaned against the bar, arms crossed, his face calm but resolute. Dana continued, "Respect isn't just about the big gestures. It's about how we treat every single person who walks through that door, no matter who they are. Tonight, some of us forgot that, and it cost us more than just a customer's trust. It put a spotlight on the kind of culture we're creating here. That has to change. The staff nodded solemnly, a few of them glancing toward Elijah, whose silence spoke volumes. They knew he wasn't just disappointed, he was holding them accountable. Jason's absence was palpable, and the message was clear. There would be no tolerance for prejudice or neglect, subtle or otherwise. Meanwhile, Elijah replayed the evening in his mind. Watching his mother endure quiet mistreatment while maintaining her grace had been painful, but it also reinforced his purpose. Riverstone Bistro wasn't just a restaurant. It was a testament to the values she had taught him: dignity, integrity, and fairness. Tonight was a stark reminder that those values needed to be lived out, not just by him, but by everyone under his leadership. Across town, Evelyn Carter sat in her living room, the soft glow of a table lamp casting a warm light on her face. She sipped a cup of tea, her thoughts returning to the events at the restaurant. Despite the discomfort she had faced, she felt a quiet satisfaction. Her son had shown strength and character, standing up not just for her, but for what was right. That was what mattered most. Back at the bistro, Elijah addressed the staff. "This restaurant isn't just a business to me," he said, his voice even but passionate. "It's a reflection of the values my mother instilled in me, values I expect all of you to share. Tonight wasn't just a bad moment, it was a wake-up call, and I promise you, it won't happen again." The room was silent as the weight of his words settled over the team. Dana stepped forward, her voice steady. "We all saw what happened tonight, and we all have to do better. This isn't just Elijah's responsibility, it's ours too. Let's make sure we earn back the trust we lost tonight." As the staff dispersed to finish closing duties, the restaurant felt different,